When I looked at this, I thought I'd make it a journey in terms of what are we seeing as a background, not just in India, but also a global background in terms of manufacturing, in terms of economic conditions, and in terms of KPIs as we see it in operational excellence in a lot of companies in India. And given that background, what are the shifts that we can see taking advantage of the trends of the background, and what are those big shifts that we can take advantage of, both from a process and also from a technology perspective. And I'll give you some examples of what companies are doing around the world in those areas, and then I'd like to summarize my thoughts. So if you look at the shifts that we're seeing, so first of all, economic shifts, and I'm sure all of you have seen this. So if you look at the economic shifts from 1970 to current, what is quite obvious here is that the gaps between the emerging economies and the advanced economies or the world economies as an average is actually growing. So increasing gap in terms of the GDP growth as you see it from somewhere around 2000 time frame. The second thing that we're also seeing from this chart is the fact that IT to GDP ratio, if you look at this along this period, hit a peak somewhere around the dot-com period, then of course took a deep decline here, and slowly coming back up post the crisis. But what is interesting to notice here, the IT to GDP ratio didn't get very much affected during the crisis over the last couple of years. What we're also seeing in terms of technological shifts, and these are massive technological shifts. And this is actually from the Wall Street Journal. And I'd like to give an example of this. In 1912, the US recovered from a 2-year recession. But what's important to observe in 1912 was electricity, the telephone, the start of assembly line manufacturing with Ford, stainless steel, radio amplifier, all around the 1912 period. What the Wall Street Journal is saying is that 2012, mobility, big data, and molecular manufacturing are going to be the trends that we're going to see that's going to revolutionize the US in terms of growth. And why is that so? Because each of these things have centers in the US, and this is where that's where the inventions are, that's where the technologies, that's where the R&D is going on, that's where the research, the PhDs are working on. So each of these areas, mobility I talked about in terms of connected devices, in terms of smartphones, mobile applications. And to give an example, if you look at the US as a sample, of course the economy is not doing great. But if you just go and spend some time in Palo Alto, that area, it looks like a completely different country. It's absolute growth. You can't find reservations in restaurants, you can't get hotel bookings. That's because the technology center happens to be in Palo Alto, the Silicon Valley, and that's still showing massive growth. In terms of big data, I give you examples of the kind of data growth that we're seeing, and again, taking advantage of the data. And what we're also seeing in terms of data growth, it's not the traditional relational data growth, it's unstructured data. When I say unstructured data, it's actually free format text that you would type in Twitter or that you would find in Facebook. So the kind of unstructured data that's growing. And those are traditional data elements that most companies just ignored, right? Or maybe they had some anecdotal information that they would take advantage of. But what we're trying to do is leverage that kind of unstructured information and make it more proactive. Molecular manufacturing, we saw a lot of articles on 3D manufacturing. That's still in its infancy. But if you look at molecular manufacturing, you're going to see companies go into nanotechnology to actually build and make things quite differently from the way it's being built today. So this again, centers are again in the US, and this we believe is going to also change the way things work. So this is from a technology shift. What we did was we looked at the 4 pillars of operational excellence as we know it. Some of you may not have these 4 pillars, but this is our definition. So first one is to be proactive in terms of innovation. So we always tend to leave innovation and R&D that as something that's outside the sphere of operational excellence. But we believe that innovation should be part of the overall operational excellence sphere. The second is be efficient, whether it's production or supply chain distribution. The third is in terms of assets, reliable assets, asset maintenance. And the fourth is be responsible in terms of sustainability. And I think the fourth one is also something that's often ignored, or it's often seen as a corporate sustainability report that has very little to do with operations. And I'll give you some KPIs that actually tie these two things together, and also some customers who have looked at sustainability as a way of reducing costs. So when you look at these KPIs in terms of operational excellence and what they do, if you look at innovation, so it's new product introduction, product management, portfolio management, in terms of operations, whether it's production planning, supply chain planning. And in terms of assets, your asset maintenance, whether it's your real estate, your property maintenance. And in terms of the operational excellence in terms of sustainability, it's operational risk management, so incident management, environment management, sustainable products, so making sure that the products don't have lead or other hazardous substances. And then from a corporate sustainability perspective in terms of reporting and analytics for your company. One of my favorite strategy authors, Fisi and Wiersma, who basically came up with this value disciplines model, saying that any company needs to look at these three areas: customer intimacy, product leadership, and operational excellence. But what they said was that you just need to be best in class in one of them and be average in the other two, and that would make you globally. But what we're seeing is basically right now that you need to be excellent in all three areas in terms of operational excellence, whether it's supply chain management, whether you look at customer intimacy, whether you look at product leadership. So making sure that you have reduce your new product introduction cycles and drive supply chain efficiency. And what's also important is that make sure that you have business intelligence anywhere, on any mobile device, and in real time.